The first time I heard her voice after she died. It came from the old answering machine in my father's house. I'd been packing boxes, sorting through what was left of two lives that never belonged together, when the machine blinked once, red, slow, insistent. I pressed play. A hiss of static, then her voice, calm, measured. The kind that knew how to make lies sound gentle. "Adam," she said, "you shouldn't have come back." That was all. No date, no number, just her voice, alive again in a dead house. Her name was Evelyn, and even when she was living, she spoke like someone already gone. I used to think it was grace. Now I know it was guilt. She married my father 3 years after my mother died. He said Evelyn made him feel settled, which was his word for numb. She kept the house too quiet, the mirrors too clean. She smiled at me the way a teacher does at a student who's about to fail, kindly, but without hope. And yet, when my father's heart stopped last winter, she was the one who called me. Her voice had cracked then. That's how I knew she still had a heart to break. Or so I thought. When she followed him into the ground 6 months later, her car skidding off the same bridge she'd crossed every day for 20 years, it felt like the final act of a play I hadn't realized I'd been trapped in. Until her voice came back. I replayed the message again and again that night. Her tone wasn't pleading. It wasn't warning, either. It was knowing. You shouldn't have come back. Back where? To the house? To the past? To the truth she'd buried alongside him? The next morning, I started finding her notes. They weren't there before, I swear they weren't. The first was in the kitchen, tucked inside a cracked mug. "Don't look in the study." The second lay on the piano, the same piano she used to play late at night when she thought no one could hear. He lied about the fire. By the time I found the third, folded into the sleeve of my father's old coat, I'd stopped pretending I didn't understand who was leaving them. "The key is still where you left it." I searched the house for hours, my breath frosting in the still air. The place felt alive in the way abandoned things do, holding on to echoes instead of memories. When I finally found the key, it was exactly where she said, taped to the back of a family portrait. Her handwriting on the tape, faint but clear. I had to hide it from him. The key fit the locked drawer in my father's desk. Inside were burned papers, edges blackened, ink warped by heat. But one page had survived. Insurance claim denied. Fire deemed intentional. Primary suspect, Evelyn Thorne. I stared at the signature at the bottom, my father's. He'd blamed her. The fire. The night he told me my mother's death was an accident. The night Evelyn stopped playing the piano. And yet, she stayed. She stayed for him. For me. For the lie. That evening, the phone rang again. The same number. "Evelyn?" I said. Silence. Then, faintly, "You shouldn't have come back." The line clicked dead. I unplugged the phone. The voice didn't stop. Now it came from other places, the creak of the stairs, the whisper of the vents. The static in the radio when I drove away from the house. At first, I thought it was memory. Then, I realized it wasn't speaking to me. It was reminding me. On the third night, I dreamed of the fire. Not the one from the insurance report, the real one. I was 7. I remember smoke, the smell of varnish, my mother's screaming. I remember Evelyn carrying me through the front door, her hands burned. Her face wet with something that wasn't just sweat. I remember my father standing outside, not moving. Watching. When I woke, my palms hurt. I turned them over. Black soot under my nails. I drove to the old bridge that morning, the one where Evelyn's car had gone over. The guardrail was still bent, the water below calm, deceptively still. At the edge of the bridge, half buried in gravel, something caught the light. A charm bracelet. Hers. The one she wore every day. Attached to it was a small flash drive, sealed in plastic. I took it home. The drive contained a single audio file. "Adam," she said, her voice steady. "If you're hearing this, you've already seen what he kept. I didn't burn your mother. He did. I stayed to keep you safe, to make him believe I'd forgiven him. I didn't crash the car, either. He cut the brakes the night before he died. He meant for both of us to go. But I lived long enough to finish what he started." A pause. Her breath, slow. "If my voice follows you now, don't be afraid. It's just the part of me that stayed behind to make sure you finally knew." Static. Then silence. The house is empty again. I left the answering machine behind, but sometimes, when I drive past the road that leads to the bridge, I hear it anyway, her voice, low, calm. Cold as the river beneath it. "Adam," she says, "don't forget who started the fire." And even though I know she's gone, I still answer. I won't. Because I've finally learned that some ghosts don't haunt out of anger. They haunt to make sure the truth survives. I thought leaving the house would quiet her. It didn't. Her voice followed me into the car, soft and measured, carried by the hum of the heater and the scrape of snow under the tires. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once. "You shouldn't have come back." I turned the radio up until the music drowned her out. But even then, her words threaded between the notes like smoke slipping under a door. When I finally pulled into the motel, the sound stopped. For the first time in days, silence felt heavy enough to touch. The clerk handed me a key with a half smile. "Been up there long?" he asked. "Too long," I said. He laughed quietly. "You look like a man trying to outdrive a ghost." I didn't answer. The room smelled of dust and bleach. I dropped my bag on the bed and opened the curtains. The lake stretched out in the distance, a frozen mirror under the moonlight. It was the same lake my father used to take me to when I was a kid. The same lake Evelyn hated. She used to say it was too quiet there. "Water remembers," she'd tell me. "That's why it never stops moving." I hadn't understood what she meant until now. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her hands reaching through fire, the way they looked that night she pulled me out. I saw my father's face, pale and still in the reflection of the flames. And always, her voice, calm as ash. Around 2 a.m., I heard knocking. 3 times. Not at the door, on the wall. When I opened it, there was nothing there. Only the faint smell of smoke. The motel lights flickered. A low hum filled the air, like an old cassette winding back. Then I heard her again, right beside me. "Check the basement," she whispered. I should have left. I should have turned around, checked out, never looked back. But ghosts have a way of convincing you there's still something to fix. The basement was through a rusted door near the ice machine. The air grew colder with every step, the concrete slick with condensation. My flashlight trembled in my hand. At the bottom of the stairs was a room, small, damp, half-finished. And on the wall, written in black marker, were words that made my throat tighten. "He burned the wrong one." Below it, taped to the wall, was a photograph. Evelyn, my father, and another woman, my mother. All smiling. Someone had cut the photo in half, cleanly, down the center. I peeled the tape back. On the wall behind it, etched faintly into the concrete, were initials. ET plus LW. Evelyn Thorne. Laura Whitfield. My mother's maiden name. I staggered back. They weren't rivals. They weren't enemies. They'd loved each other. That's why my father burned the house. Not out of rage, out of shame. When I got back to the room, the clock read 3:03 a.m. I sat on the bed, heart pounding, the photograph still in my hand. Her voice came again, softer this time, closer. I told you not to come back, she said. Why? I whispered. Why tell me now? Because the truth doesn't rest until someone carries it. I don't want it. I know, she said. Neither did I. The light flickered again, once, twice. Then it went out completely. In the darkness, I felt her hand on my shoulder, cold, but steady, grounding. And for the first time since she died, I wasn't afraid. When morning came, I packed the photo, locked the door, and drove toward the bridge. The sun was low, glinting off the ice. As I crossed, the car's radio crackled once more. Static. Then her voice, one last time. He burned the wrong one, Adam. But I kept you alive so you could put out what's left. The sound faded, replaced by wind. I didn't look back. But in the rearview mirror, for just a second, I saw her reflection in the back seat, smiling faintly, her eyes calm. Her mouth moving in silence. And though I couldn't hear her anymore, I knew exactly what she was saying. You're free now. By the time I reached the city, the snow had turned to rain. It fell in thin gray sheets, erasing the world the way memory does when it's tired of being remembered. I checked into another motel, different name. Same smell, and told myself I'd stop thinking about her voice. About the photo. About all of it. But ghosts don't stop when you do. I kept hearing her in small, ordinary sounds, the hum of a refrigerator, the rhythm of windshield wipers, the soft static before a radio catches a signal. Always the same tone, low, calm, like she was sitting just behind me, speaking to my reflection. You think leaving is forgetting. I spent the first few days in silence. Then I started searching. Old newspapers, property records, obituaries. I told myself it was to confirm what I'd seen written in the motel basement, he burned the wrong one. But really, I think I wanted her to keep talking. It didn't take long to find it, a small article. Almost invisible between the columns of local gossip. House fire claims 1. Widow survives. Cuz undetermined. The date matched. The address matched. But the name of the deceased wasn't my mother's. It was Evelyn Thorne. I stared at the page until my vision blurred. She couldn't have died twice. Unless she hadn't died at all. That night the rain got heavier. The motel lights flickered. I dreamed of her standing outside my door, dripping wet, her hair plastered to her face. When I opened the door, she smiled. I told you not to come back, she said. You're not real. She leaned close, whispering against my ear. Neither are you, not anymore. I woke gasping, the smell of smoke thick in my nose. The window was open. And on the desk, where there'd been nothing before, sat another note, written in her handwriting, the looped letters careful and clean. Stop digging up what survived. Below it was a key. I knew before I picked it up where it would fit. There was only one place left tied to her, my father's cabin by the lake. The one they used to disappear to when I was a child. I drove there the next morning. The road was half flooded, the trees bent low with rain. When I reached the clearing, the cabin looked smaller than I remembered, almost harmless. Inside, everything was exactly as it had been. The worn sofa, the framed photographs. The faint smell of cedar and dust. But there was something new. On the table by the window sat a tape recorder. And beside it, a single cassette labeled in black marker, "The Truth." Her voice filled the room as soon as I pressed play. "Adam," she said, "if you're here, you've done what I hoped you wouldn't. But maybe you deserve to know. The fire wasn't an accident. Your father started it. But it wasn't meant for me. It was meant for your mother." Static. A pause. He thought she'd found out about us. About what we were. He was right. She'd confronted me that night. She begged me to leave him, to take you and go. I didn't listen. I thought I could keep him calm. I thought I could control him. Her voice broke slightly, barely audible but real. He lit the match before I could stop him. I tried to get her out, but the smoke, God, the smoke, by the time I pulled you free. It was already too late. He made me swear I'd never tell you. He said you'd hate me if you knew. Static again. He was right, but I couldn't let her name die with her. So I took it. I became her. Laura Thorne. It was the only way to make sure she stayed alive somewhere. I froze. She hadn't been Evelyn. She hadn't even been Marianne. She had been my mother all along, reborn through guilt and fire. The woman who raised me wasn't a stranger trying to replace what I'd lost. She was the piece that had survived. When the tape clicked off, the silence was unbearable. The rain had stopped. The world outside the window was gray and still. I walked to the mirror above the sink. For a moment, my reflection flickered, two faces overlapping, hers and mine, the same eyes. The same faint scar at the corner of the mouth. And then I heard her again, clear as the first time. "You shouldn't have come back." Only now I understood what she'd meant. It wasn't a warning. It was regret. Because coming back meant remembering everything she'd tried to bury, the love, the betrayal. The fire that had burned away her name. I left the cabin as the light began to fade. The tape still played in my head, her voice tangled with mine. When I reached the lake, the surface was perfectly still, reflecting the sky in shades of steel and ash. I took the key from my pocket and threw it into the water. It vanished without a ripple. Her voice didn't follow this time. Only the wind, soft and final, whispering through the reeds. "Now you know who I was. Don't forget who you are." I stood there until darkness fell, the world quiet except for the steady breath of the lake. And for the first time, I realized that her voice hadn't haunted me to punish me. It had followed me so I'd remember how to listen, even to the ghosts that speak in my own blood. I stayed away for weeks after the cabin. I thought distance would smother the sound of her. That if I filled my days with motion, driving, eating, sleeping in borrowed beds, she'd fade like smoke on the wind. But she didn't. Her voice lived in the quiet spaces between things. The pause before rain touched the windshield, the sigh of the refrigerator door closing. The click between songs on the radio, always soft. Always patient. "You're still not listening, Adam." I tried ignoring it, then I tried answering. "What else do you want?" I said one night while parked on the shoulder of the highway. Headlights cutting through mist. "Nothing." Then, faintly, "Go home." The house had been sold months ago, but I drove back anyway. The new owners had painted it white, put flower boxes under the windows, hung wind chimes by the porch. The place looked smaller, almost innocent. I sat there for a long time, watching the curtains move, waiting for something to happen. When nothing did, I got out. The wind chimes clattered softly, her voice moved through them. Inside. I should have left. I didn't. The back door was unlocked. The kitchen had been remodeled, new counters, New paint, but beneath it all, the old bones of the house still creaked the same. I followed the sound of dripping water to the hallway. The study door was open. Someone had cleaned the soot from the walls. But the floorboards still bore faint scorch marks, dark veins under the varnish. I knelt and ran my fingers across them. The boards gave slightly under my touch, hollow. There was something beneath. I pried them up. Underneath was a small metal box, blackened at the corners, sealed with tape. Inside, wrapped in a burnt piece of cloth, was a journal. Not my father's. Hers. The first page was water-stained, the ink running like tears. If I die again, let this be my confession. The night of the fire, he didn't mean to kill her. He meant to erase her. He said two women who loved him couldn't exist in the same house. He was wrong. Only one of us ever truly did. I turned the page. When the flames came, I thought it was punishment. But fire doesn't punish, it transforms. I crawled out, and when I looked in the mirror afterward, I didn't recognize the face. So I took hers. It was the only way to save what little of her I could. I read until the words began to blur. She hadn't just become my mother to protect me. She'd become her out of devotion. Out of grief. Out of a need to keep love alive in a form that could survive the fire. Down the hall, the wind rose again, carrying the faint sound of the chimes. Go to the lake. Her voice whispered. I didn't argue. By the time I got there, night had fallen. The moon lay stretched across the water. The reflection trembling as if something beneath it was breathing. I stood at the edge, clutching the journal. The same way she must have once stood with me in her arms, smoke behind her. The world burning away. I know, I said into the dark. I know everything now. For a long time, nothing answered. Then the wind shifted, cold and clean, and her voice came again, quieter than before. Then you can stop carrying me. The water rippled, small circles moving outward, vanishing into black. I dropped the journal into the lake. It sank quickly, the pages opening like a pair of wings before the surface closed over it. As I turned to leave, I saw her. Not standing on the shore or walking across the ice, just reflected faintly in the water, her outline shimmering with the movement of the waves. She didn't speak, she didn't have to. For the first time, her silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like forgiveness. I drove until morning. The horizon lightened, and with it, something inside me finally loosened. Her voice didn't follow anymore. Not as sound, not as warning. But sometimes, when the wind catches the trees a certain way, I still hear the faintest echo, you're listening now. And I whisper back, I know. Then I let the road take me forward. Into a world where her voice has become something else entirely, not a ghost. Not a grief, just the quiet, steady rhythm of memory finally learning how to rest. The road stretched out in front of me. A long ribbon of gray cutting through the thawing fields. I didn't have a destination, only direction, away. Away from the lake, away from the house. Away from the sound of her voice that no longer haunted but still lingered. Like the echo of a song that refuses to end. Spring had started to show itself in small, defiant ways. Wildflowers forcing their way through cracks in the pavement. The smell of damp earth rising from ditches. It should have felt like renewal. It didn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her reflection on the water. That final look, neither sorrow nor peace, something in between. The kind of expression people wear when they've forgiven you but know you'll never forgive yourself. In a town I didn't recognize, I stopped at a diner that looked as tired as I felt. The waitress poured coffee without asking and said, "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I have," I said. She laughed, but I didn't. There was a radio playing behind the counter, an old jazz station. The static louder than the music. And beneath the static, faint but clear, a familiar voice threaded through. "You're still running from the wrong things, Adam." My hands went still around the cup. I stared at the radio. The waitress didn't notice anything. "Did you hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" I didn't answer. Because I'd finally realized something. The voice wasn't following me. It was coming from me. I drove until night. The highway emptied and the stars came out in thin, uncertain lines. I stopped at a rest area, killed the engine, and sat in the dark. I thought about everything she'd done, stealing a name, burying a truth. Saving me in a way that looked too much like destruction. I'd spent years blaming her for the fire, for the lies. For the way she'd wrapped my life in silence. But all she'd really done was try to keep me from becoming him. And maybe she had succeeded. Because sitting there, alone, listening to the wind move through the car vents, I heard her one last time. "It's time to let me go." Her voice wasn't cold anymore. It was warm, almost human. The way it had sounded when I was a child and she'd tuck me into bed. Whispering stories she pretended weren't hers. "Don't forget what love costs, Adam. But don't live in the debt of it." Then the sound faded, the static unraveling into nothing. I didn't go back to the house again. I didn't need to. I sold what was left, donated the money, and rented a small apartment near the edge of the city. The building was quiet, the walls thin enough to let in the sound of the street below. Sirens. Laughter, the hum of ordinary life. I started walking every morning, tracing the same route through the park. Past the fountain that never quite worked. And slowly, I stopped listening for her voice. But she was still there, in the rhythm of my steps, in the way sunlight caught on glass. In every breath that came easier than it used to. One evening, I sat by the window and wrote her name on a scrap of paper. Evelyn. Then below it, Laura. I folded it once, twice, and set it on fire in an ashtray. The smoke curled upward, soft and blue, and for a moment, I swore I saw her face in it, smiling. "You're listening now." The smoke drifted out the window and disappeared into the night. When I went to bed, the apartment was silent. Not heavy, not haunted, just still. And in that stillness, I finally understood what her haunting had meant. She hadn't followed me to punish me. She'd followed me to return something I didn't know I'd lost, the sound of my own voice. Unshaken, unafraid. I whispered into the dark, "I'm here." No one answered. And for the first time, that was enough. The summer came in quietly, the way peace sometimes does, without ceremony, without warning. The air smelled of rain and cut grass, and for the first time in years, I stopped waiting for the sound of her voice. I didn't realize how much space silence took up until I finally had some. I started teaching again, part-time at a small school by the river. My students asked about ghosts and myths, about stories that refused to die. I told them that ghosts were just unfinished thoughts, echoes looking for a listener. I didn't tell them that I used to be one of those echoes. At night, I walked home along the water. The reflection of the streetlights rippled across the surface, gold breaking against the current. Sometimes, if I watched long enough, I'd catch a glimmer, something white beneath the ripples. A trick of light, or maybe not. I'd stopped trying to tell the difference. One evening, near the end of August, I found a letter slipped under my apartment door. No return address, no name, just my own written in a careful, looping hand. Inside, a single page. You've learned to listen. That's all I ever wanted. L. There was nothing else. No explanation, no haunting promise. Just the steady weight of handwriting that shouldn't exist anymore. I sat there for a long time, the paper trembling in my hands. The quiet pressing close around me. I didn't feel fear this time. Only gratitude. Because she wasn't warning me anymore. She was saying goodbye. The next morning, I went to the lake one last time. It looked different now, smaller, calmer, the water low from the summer heat. The world smelled like sun and pine, and the air carried a warmth that didn't belong to ghosts. I walked to the dock and stood where she'd once stood, where all of this had begun and ended. The surface was so clear I could see the silt beneath, the occasional flicker of a fish. In my pocket, I carried the burnt scrap of paper with her name. The one I'd saved from the ashtray without knowing why. I let it fall from my fingers. It landed on the water and drifted a moment before dissolving completely. There was no voice, no chill in the air, just the quiet sound of the lake taking something back. When I turned to leave, I saw my reflection in the water. For the first time, it was only mine. No shadows behind it, no borrowed face waiting beneath. And yet, I could still hear her words from that last tape, soft and steady. The truth doesn't rest until someone carries it. She'd carried it long enough. Now it was mine, but it no longer felt heavy. I took a breath, deep and clean. The wind shifted, and in the distance, a single chime rang out, a sound so faint it could have been memory. I smiled. Then I walked away from the lake, toward the life she'd made sure I could have. The world was quiet, and the quiet, for once, was kind.